Good morning. Thought I'd jump on and make a quick video this morning. Just a little bit about my company and what I've kind of got planned, or I've had planned for Charge Electrical all along, and what's really starting to work now, and what I'm really proud of actually, in terms of how we work compared to other companies. And I think the main thing that put me off going into business for years and years was seeing how stressed other business owners were, who I was working for. So I had friends who were running businesses who just seemed to be running around just in chaos. It just seemed like chaos, to be honest, all the time. And I've worked for a lot of small companies. I've done a lot of traveling around the world, so I've worked for probably at least 10 small domestic electrical companies, as well as some much larger companies. And the running theme seemed to be that the boss was always burnt out, always running ragged, in a flap. The customers tended, and this wasn't every company, but this was a bit of a running theme, people tended to get let down a lot. And if you ask anybody, have you been let down by a tradesman before? Anyone who's used tradesmen on more than one occasion will probably say yes. And this is something I noticed because I've always really enjoyed doing smaller jobs. So when I've worked for companies, they've always sort of handed that side of things to me, because a lot of guys just like being on the bigger projects. And so you book in a smaller job, and a lot of the time I was booking them in myself, dealing direct with the customer. Sometimes my boss would book them in, but often I would have a relationship with the customer already, whether I was working for myself or not. And say a job was getting, for an example, say this morning we had a job booked in for 9 a.m. and this would happen all the time, and I would have in my diary 9 a.m, say 2 hours fitting some light fittings for Mrs. Smith. I would get a call at 7 or half 7 saying, Charlie, look, you can't go there today. You're going to have to go to this site and do this and this, because the builder's phoned up, and if we get behind, we're not going to get the cables in time. And so I hated that side of it, because you're always letting people down, and then I would often be the one to go back to Mrs. Smith. Sometimes it was the boss, but either way, I just didn't like letting people down, because I've often built relationships with these people. And so that was another thing that put me off. So it was the fact everyone was running around in a flap and a stress, and the fact that you're just letting people down all the time, because it seemed to me that you couldn't run an electrical company whereby you always showed up and did what you said. But then I was lucky enough to be around the world of sort of personal development and mindset growth and things like that, and read a lot of really interesting books. And what I started to realize is that you can kind of grow and develop a company in whatever way you want to. And if you leave the right amount of space and time between jobs, you can 100% show up when you say you're going to. And that was my commitment from the start. And bigger than that was my commitment to not work for any builders or developers, because that's where most people get let down. Most people get let down because if I've got 10 grand riding on a huge job, which happens quite a lot, these big rewires, and I booked in Mrs. Smith that morning, but the builder, and not all builders are like this, but often builders can be disorganized, and they will phone you on that morning and say, mate, I really need you to get here, sorry for the last minute rush, but the plasterers are coming this week and we need the cables in. You can't really turn that down, because you've already got however many thousands riding on that job. So you sort of have to, in that position, start letting people down. And so yeah, I made a decision early on not to take on those big contracts. I don't work for builders, I don't work for developers, I work directly to the client only. And that means I always show up when I say I'm going to, apart from an emergency, but it's very rare. I think if you speak to most people I've worked with, they'll say Charlie's fastidious with his word and always showing up when he says he's going to. I allow a lot of time for communications. I would actually say I have at least a day a week, 2 half days a week of admin, just so that I always invoice that week, same week as I do the work. If it's finished, if it's a complete project, I always do my quotes within the week. I always get certificates back to people within the week. Again, they're just things that if you don't deal with them straight away, they'll be hanging over you, or it just won't happen. And I've seen it so many time and time again, customers having to chase people for quotes and invoices, and that's another thing that when I set this company up, I said I don't want to be like that. I want it to be cut and dry every week. You're finished, out the door, all the materials are ordered for the following week. Another pet hate of mine, and I'm sure a lot of people have experienced it, is guys turning up and starting to do a job and then saying, oh, I just got to nip off to the wholesalers to get this. And I just, don't get me wrong, I'm sure there's times when it'll happen to me, but it hasn't done for, I don't think I've done that in the time that I've been running my company in 3 years, had to nip off and get something, because I just make sure my van's stocked and I have everything for the following week on the van, so there's zero wasted time. So yeah, it does take being very strict about when you book working, because like I said, I have to allow 2 full half days a week every week to keep up with the admin. It's a huge amount of admin, and that's without doing any marketing. You know, I also get up and do probably half an hour to 40 minutes every day of making sure that my ads are running and all that kind of thing. So it definitely takes a lot of work in the office to keep a business running like this, but it is doable. And it's something I'm really proud of, and it's starting to really pay off now, where I'm getting a lot of recommendations from people saying, you know, Charlie actually does what he says he's going to. It's refreshing to have somebody who's good at communication. And yeah, so I'd love to hear from anybody who finds this a breath of fresh air, or who's been let down by people in the past and who has always wondered, well, why do tradesmen always let us down? I don't, you know, you may have had a light bulb moment during this of, wow, that's why so many tradesmen let us down, is because they've got their money riding on the bigger jobs, or maybe you've had an experience of working with me. Hopefully it's a good experience. That's kind of what I strive for, is just to give the best customer experience I can possibly give. And so yeah, I'd love to hear back from anybody who has had either of those, interacted with me or had a positive or negative experience with being kind of let down by people. All right, have a great day. Take care. Bye.